Good morning and welcome to this REC webinar, which looks at the Prime Minister's COVID-19 statement, Key Messages for Recruiters. My name is Richard Charnock and I hope you can hear us all clearly. Please can you let us know using the text box for questions on the right-hand side of your screen. You can use the same text box to ask questions throughout the webinar and we'll try to answer them all. If we can't, then we'll ensure we're covered up in the follow-up email and the slides with the poll questions. Over the past 7 weeks, our weekly webinars have focused on the practical steps businesses need to take to adapt to the new norm, adjust the way you and your people work, and how to prepare the future or for the future. Our focus today is discussing what the government plans to do in phase 2 of the response to COVID-19 and what it means to you, your people and your business. In addition to our regular panel of speakers, we're joined today by the REC's Chief Executive, Neil Carberry. Our usual panelists are Paul Jacobs and Howard Greenwood from Love Work Life. Their consultancy provides ethical support to help drive both businesses and growth. Paul has spent over 40 years in the recruitment industry and is the former managing director of Office Angels. Howard has spent over 25 years in the industry and has a proven track record of managing businesses, increasing both their revenues and profitability. Also with us is Dave Pye and Bradley Plax from To Augment. To Augment are business consultants and strategic advisors to the recruitment industry. Brad and Dave work in non-exec advisory capacity with their clients both in the UK and abroad. Dave is well known as an MD and CEO within the industry and is presently a non-exec director of both recruitment and technology businesses. Bradley's been in the industry for over 25 years as a recruiter, business director and non-exec director. Bradley's better known to you all as the founder of Broadbean. So without further ado, let's turn to our first speaker. Neil, the Prime Minister set out the government's plan for how we will gradually leave lockdown. We've got the guidance and the REC team have been reviewing this so we can provide recruiters with practical guidance and steps to take. Additionally, over the past several weeks, you've been involved in numerous discussions with government and other key stakeholders. Can you give us an overview of the phase 2 guidelines and what it means for our audience?
Well, thanks, Richard, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad Richard's finally let me onto one of these webinars because he's been trying to keep me back from them for weeks. I hope you're all doing okay. I thought I'd say a little bit this morning about the nature of the REC's engagement with government because I think it helps tee up what happens next in terms of the growth. And then I'll focus on the 5 key things that government is thinking about in terms of what you should be doing both as an employer, but also obviously thinking about speaking with your clients for any temps that you're placing into workplaces that have been deemed to be COVID safe. And I think that's a really important point as I run past it, that client relationships and client discussion are going to be critical to being able to safely place temps into workplaces. Since the crisis started, the REC's engagement with government has been hugely grown. We obviously keep kind of private metrics on how we're doing in terms of influencing government. Roughly, we're having double the impact inside government we normally would have, and on a whole range of issues. Just yesterday, we finally got the additional holiday pay guidance for the furlough scheme out of government, which we've been working on for a month now. It's taken a long time. I reflected to one member this morning that I found negotiating that more difficult than negotiating the original agency workers deal when I was at the CBI. But we've also been doing things with other federations, for instance, working with the ABI and the CBI on the credit insurance support that was announced yesterday by the Chancellor. And that framework of talking to ministers at least and usually more than once a week, talking to other business organisations from across the economy, working with the CBI, that has been the framework that we are using on the inside to pedal really hard to address the kind of tick list that members have given us to in terms of government policy. Clearly, that piece around all that support will continue, but the flip on Monday is into, well, how do we help businesses grow back? And there's a whole slew of things in policy that surrounds the health and safety piece that we have to get right. Credit insurance was one of them that I've already mentioned, but you also have issues like part-time furlough, which I know is something that many people wanted for their own staff, which looks like we'll be able to get, but then that poses some questions about whether part-time furlough can apply to temps and how it applies to temps, and a whole range of new issues that we'll need to work through. So my plea to you is keep talking to us about everything that you're seeing, because there's no complexity to how we're doing this. There's a giant spreadsheet with everything, all the concerns members are raising, and our analysis of how all the policies affect the industry, and we are just working through it. And the more checks there are on the spreadsheet, the higher up our agenda it goes. So my plea, and some of you will have seen on my LinkedIn posts, is stay safe, but stay in touch with us. Keep talking to us about how your business is going. Keep talking to us about what you want. So to turn specifically to the question of Monday's announcement, I think two things are important to note first. One, there is a staged approach here. And so while workplaces are allowed to open, they're allowed to open in a certain way now, and that will evolve over time. So going back to 2 Sundays ago, when I was given a mighty 12 hours on a Sunday to read all 9 documents and feedback, very clear from then that what we have at the moment is quite a tightly defined set of documents that are about inching forward to reopening and normalizing the economy, and that they will change over time with the kind of COVID, the 5-stage COVID alert system that the government's set out. Now, coming to I think the critical question, which is, well, what do we have to do to open up workplaces? The place to start is that as an employer, your duties under the law have not changed. The Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, and I'm drawing on work years ago when I used to work quite closely with the HSE, has not actually changed at all. This is just another risk to go on the risk assessment that the law requires you to produce. And of course, if you're a very small business, you don't have to write it down, but for most businesses, you do. The 5 things the government are focusing on at the moment are really clear. First things first, if your people can work from home, government still wants them working from home. This is not an encouragement to open up generally. It's really at this stage focused on opening up the workplaces that actually government never closed, workplaces which cannot operate from home and which they want opening now to start to drive the economy. Things like local garages, things like construction sites, manufacturing sites, businesses which closed down because they were concerned and wanted to work through what they should do. The government wants them opening up now. So first things first, the work from home if you can guidance hasn't changed. Secondly then, do your risk assessment, and it's a different risk assessment to what we've seen before, because you're putting a virus on it. It's not how does my machinery or my office environment affect people's health and safety. It's about something much more fundamental, and there is a lot of guidance there about what you can and should do in the government guidance. The critical things are firstly making sure your cleaning, hand washing, hygiene procedures are right, that you can as far as possible maintain the 2-meter social distancing guidelines, and where you can't maintain those guidelines, that you've taken reasonable steps to manage the transmission risk. And clearly there, things like PPE will come into the debate, and also the question of how do you reduce the amount of sub 2-meter working that people need to do. So there's a whole stream of thinking there around those 5 steps that the government have set out. That's really about following the path we've always taken on health and safety in the UK, which is do a risk assessment, we all know that you can't eliminate this risk, and the British system doesn't rely on you eliminating the risk. None of us can be asked to guarantee that the virus is completely untransmissible on our work sites. But what we should be able to do is say we've done everything reasonable to avoid transmission, and that will be the test that the HSE will follow. Importantly, talk to the people that you're bringing in about their concerns. Maybe do before you open, before you consider opening, or even actually now while you're still closed, doing a survey of how people are feeling, and making sure that you're accessing all the support that's available. From the REC perspective, I think there's two big issues where the government guidance is currently short and we're focusing on. One is, going back to that point earlier, I know how to risk assess for stress in the REC head office. I don't know how to risk assess for virus transmission. I've never done it before, so we need some support on that, and we're pushing government to be clearer on the things that companies should be thinking about. Big questions around things like break rooms and whether you should shut them or socially distance them and so forth. The second big bit that companies have no control over, and it's a particular challenge for businesses in conurbations, in town centres and city centres, is public transport. And we've certainly heard that that's a big concern for many workers, and we're pushing hard for a clearer plan for public transport, because clearly it's easier to open up in a socially distanced way right now if you have an office on a business park with a car park outside than if you have an office in a city centre where people take the bus to work, or they take a train into the town centre. So it's just really important to bear in mind those other concerns which aren't under your control, aren't necessarily in your risk assessment for your site, but which will affect the ability and willingness of staff to engage with a return to work plan. So think about it staged, do the risk assessment, don't rush in. There's lots of good advice out there, we're producing it ourselves. And then thinking beyond your own business and into client sites, which is really important. That's the same approach that your clients should be taking. And you should always remember that the responsibility for health and safety on a site under the Act is with the site operator. So you need to have a really good discussion with your clients, if you're placing temps in this environment, about what they're doing about these 5 things. And there will be debates to be had. Who pays for PPE for your temps, for instance, is one I've already heard about in situations where temps have to wear a mask. There's a whole slew of other things, but the first place to start in terms of where temps are placed is just making sure that your clients have done that risk assessment and that you feel comfortable with that risk assessment. And after all, these are your workers, therefore you still have a duty of care to them, and you defray that duty of care by looking at the risk assessment your client has done and feeling comfortable with it. Now, I know that that both for your own staff and for your temps that you're placing, there is no heads or tails, black or white answer to this, and that is the challenge, because this is not a game of risk elimination, it's a game of risk mitigation, and ultimately the system relies on the judgment of business leaders about how safe a workplace is. And remember, the legal framework is in place right up to and including corporate manslaughter. Now, I don't think you'd ever see a corporate manslaughter case around coronavirus unless the situation was very egregious and something that we'd all know would be utterly wrong. But that full range of sanctions that usually exists for health and safety still exists. So making sure that you've done the work before you go into open is important. And if we get it right, obviously that helps control the spread of the virus and lets us get back into normal operations. Certainly the REC view shared with the CBI and sector bodies across the economy is that the critical thing in this lockdown, and as we unwind it, is not to have to do this again, because better to have an extra week or 2 now getting this right and getting the pacing of the unwinding correct than to have to do all this again in October or November, when we really would be looking at the worst, by far the worst year in the British economy in modern history. So from that point of view, care, get your risk assessment right, thinking about the mitigation steps you have to take, getting in touch with clients and having a really clear plan with them. It's another opportunity to really deepen your relationship with clients. Those are the key things right now. And as I've said at the top of my piece, critically, if there are gaps, if there are things you don't see guidance on that you need to know about, people have said to me that the REC has been helpful in the last few weeks and months. That's what we're here for. So get in touch with us. It might be that we have something that can help. It might be that there's a gap from government that we should raise, but that's what we're here for right now. Come back to us and we will do everything we can. Richard, that was all I was going to say at the moment. I don't know if there's anything anything you want to pick up on the questions now, or we can roll on and hear from our colleagues.
Neil. Yeah, there's probably a couple that are worth just a little bit of exploring. There's a very specific one that was about the health and safety information that you were talking about, and it's about when people are working from home. And it is, if you're telling staff to work from home or to continue to work from home, what are the responsibilities with regards to health and safety? My interpretation is that it's the same as it has been, which is it is your responsibility as an employer to make sure people are safe in their workplace of work, and if that's at home, safe at home. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, you know how, with my background in health and safety work, you know how cautious I am about the definitions around about when the REC Christmas party starts and finishes. And the reason for that is if people are doing a work thing, it's a workplace, and your duty of care applies. So yes, absolutely. If you are not opening and you are keeping people working from home, if you're sitting where I am now or where Richard is, you absolutely should have your ops teams, your back office teams thinking about how are we looking after people's mental health in this scenario. And Bradley's done some great stuff for us over on the REC professional side in terms of thinking about people's maintenance of resilience and focus and break time and so forth, and right down to getting advice to people about things that will help them not suffer from what all the cool kids in HSE called an MSD, a musculoskeletal disorder. Are you sitting in the wrong chair? Are you sitting in the wrong position? You probably should be advising staff on stuff like that if you're keeping them at home even longer. I think everyone would understand that it hadn't been done up to now because of the rush of moving to remote working. But if it's a longer run, probably time to think about doing that.
Yeah, I think there's been a follow-up question while we've been discussing it, and I think again there's an answer. So the question is, how do you complete those risk assessments at people's homes? I will make sure that there is a link added to the email that comes out as after this, because we have some information at the REC, but also the Health and Safety Executive has a whole section of their web devoted to this. And if you're thinking about posture positions and chair positions and things like that to demonstrate to your staff on that website, the health and safety website, there's even a self-explanatory video that says how does somebody conduct it. Now, obviously, people can't go to somebody's house to conduct a self-assessment themselves, but asking the individuals to do that and take in these considerations is in that guidance from HSE. So we will ensure that link is included in the wash up. If anybody'd like any further clarification, please do keep questioning and we'll keep coming back to them, and we'll take it from there. The other question I'd like to cover off that was it's about the host clients. You said that the host client or the place of work, we're not talking home working now, we're talking about a place of work where a temporary worker may be placed. The audience are saying, should they be requesting COVID-19 specific risk assessments at this point from their clients?
I would ask to see their workplace risk assessment, and I would expect COVID-19 to be on there. And I think you should be asking. And I think prima facie, because you have a duty of care to your temps, remember it's dual liability, you still have the duty of care to your temps under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Your client has a duty of care because they operate the workplace. The way you establish that you're doing the right thing, the first thing you do is you are able to show that you've looked at the risk assessment and you've looked at the mitigation that your client has set out, and at the very most limited level that you have complied with the things your client's asking. But actually, it's a good basis for a discussion about, well, what else could we do together to protect staff? So yeah, absolutely, start with the risk assessment.
Yeah. Great, and we've already had the listener come back and say thank you. They've got some risk assessments, but not necessarily covering COVID. So I think it's a go back. I think the answer is to go back and ask for it to be included.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll still take questions from everybody, and Neil will be coming back into the webinar later on. So please do. I
won't be leaving. I'll disappear, but I won't be leaving.
Thank you. Please do keep your questions coming in. There will be opportunities to get answers from all of our panelists, including Neil. So I'll aggregate them together and make sure those questions are asked. So thank you, Neil. We'll move on now to our next key question for our panelists as a whole, which basically over the last few weeks, we've discussed developing your business strategy, managing day-to-day challenges alongside keeping your staff trained, motivated during this period of disruption. We know that many recruitment business owners are looking at government's latest plan and guidance and trying to identify all the practical steps they're taking or should be taking to be business ready for the government's three-step plan. I'd like the panelists to discuss this in its whole, but let's turn to Dave in the first instance. Could you give us your views, please, Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Morning, everybody. I hope you are continuing to be safe and well. Can you believe it is day 50 of our lockdown, which I think has become a bit of a latch down because we can go out a little bit more, but not much more. We've had to, on this webinar, address some significant challenges, as Richard and Neil have pointed out. We had that first look at that resolve that we had to show to get our setup at home, and then we went into that resilience that we've spoken about, looking at furloughing our staff, the different approaches we've taken to candidates that we've got in play, what do we do with them, the guidance that we're giving to our candidates. And as we're now moving into that third stage about returning to work, still for us in recruitment, probably most of you who are listening to this are still working from home, hopefully, and still with clients who are also working from home. So I wanted to just address what has been raised about the furloughing staff that we've got, because we had three things. We had people, we had planning, and we had purpose. What we left the last webinar saying is that purpose is the new strategy for recruiters. What is the purpose of your business? How are you engaging with your clients, with your candidates and your staff? And it is important that in this return phase, we are beginning to write up a detailed plan of what the next few months will look like for our businesses. And you as leaders out there should be doing that anyway. But it should be based around your people, and clearly some of your people aren't working with you. You think that some of those people have probably been divorced from your businesses for quite a while. I know of some chief execs who have been training their people, who have had external trainers in for those that are on furlough, but also know some that haven't really had the opportunity or haven't taken the time to speak to the people on furlough. And now part of your planning process should be, what am I going to do with those people? They're still part of the family, but they're on furlough. They're not working, they can't work. I remind them once again, they can be trained. And as a leader, you should be in contact with them. But you should also be thinking as you plan, we want all of our people, if we can, to get back to work as soon as we can. But go back to the purpose. Who are the best people who are going to help you build your businesses for whatever the next normal looks like? Neil mentioned about client discussion is critical, client relationships are critical. Who are the best people who can engage with your clients as we go forward for the next 3, 4, 5 months? Because this year we know is going to be very different. And if you've got people who before this lockdown happened and before they were furloughed weren't so good at that, then you probably need to engage in training with them and look at them. Because what we do as recruiters now in the next 3 or 4 months or 5 months is going to be ever more important. Potentially, there are going to be a lot more candidates available for clients to choose. So who are the best people at engaging with those candidates? Who are the people on furlough and in your office who are the best people for engaging with those candidates? You've got to be able to reimagine how different your business may look in the next few months, because the next normal that we've been speaking about in the last sort of 49 days, well, that is now beginning to be here. And the shift is beginning to happen, and very, very slowly we're going to be returning to work. And this is going to be a big step back for some of those people. Yes, we know the furlough scheme has been extended well into the summer, but there's going to be a chance perhaps that some of them can come back on a part-time basis. So can you begin to plan and prepare for what that could look like for them? What skills do they need? Where do they fit into the plan? The purpose that you have for your business, where do they fit in with that? Can they defend what we do as recruiters? Can they defend our margins? Can they defend the value that we create for the organizations that we're dealing with? And if not, again, come back to perhaps some training, or you've got to work out whether they're the right people for your business as you go forward. Your leadership is developing as we return, as we get back to work. And these are some of the things to think about, because your role as a leader is to help shape the future of your company, and your staff are looking to you to say, well, where do I fit in that? And Neil said it earlier on, constant communication with your people, talking about the business, what's going on, and all the questions around health and safety. They're going to want to know that as well. So that's got to fit into that plan. So focus on the core customers you've got and the key people, and make sure you engage with those people on furlough as well. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Dave. You caught me out there. I was filtering through all the questions we've had.
Okay.
So and we've just we'll move on to Paul for now, but after you've all had a chance to talk through the points on this, I do want us as a panel, including Neil, to come back over the points around furlough specifically. We've got some technical questions around that, as well as some of the more strategic questions. But anyway, enough from me. Paul, over to you, please.
Hi everybody, hope you're all keeping well, and yeah, as we're talking about another latch down week, as Dave described it. It's a very good description. Just picking up on a couple of points that Dave's been talking about. I was reading a quote from the ex-New Zealand Prime Minister yesterday, who said never waste a crisis, and what he was talking about was the opportunity that all businesses have now got to, as Dave's been talking about, assess the quality of the people that they have in the business and be aware of their abilities and their skill sets in relation to what we're now calling the new world of work as we go forward. And that's certainly about training people. It's also about the opportunity to be reviewing the talent base that you have, making sure they're aligned to the specific roles that you're going to be giving them once we return to work. But it's also a brilliant time to be considering recruiting new talent, bringing in fresh people into your business. You know, there's a lot of discussion at the moment, of course, around redundancies and companies shedding people. But I think there's a great opportunity here for us to be reviewing the gaps we have in our business and going out to find new people within the to bring into the organization that could make a significant difference for us in terms of gaining market share and adapting to the technologies we're going to be using as we go forward. We've now got an opportunity, of course, to look at, as we've talked about, and Neil's point was very interesting relative to the issue of furloughing, bringing furloughed staff back, and this discussion around part-time furloughing, which I think would be incredibly helpful for all of us in the UK. It's already been apparent elsewhere in the world, and mentioned New Zealand. I've got a client in New Zealand. They've been using part-time furloughed staff for weeks now, and I think that would be an extremely good thing for us. Then you've got a couple of tipping points, if you like, at this stage, because one of the things we've really got to do now is to be talking to our clients and doing it very urgently, because as we've already discussed, certain sectors are already back. Construction is returning, manufacturing is returning, the supply chains that provide to those industry sectors are back in play, and that's now going to gain in momentum in terms of the workloads, and we'll start to see other sectors slowly but surely going back to work. And you do now need to be speaking to your clients to establish just precisely what is going to be happening within their businesses relative to their staffing requirements. Now, we've said many times that we're coming out, as it were, of this current situation, this lockdown, and now, of course, there is talk from the Bank of England and other institutions around that horrible R-word, recession. No, it's hardly a surprise if you've closed the country down for 3-4 months that we're going to have a very steep decline in the economy. There's also a view that we'll see a sharp increase in the economy once we get into 2021, but let's not delude ourselves. We are going to have a tough time. The country is going to have a tough time for the remaining part of this year, hopefully gradually improving as we go through the year. But there's no question that when you look at the cycle of recessions and the way employers react during these periods, and I've had plenty of experience of this over the years, one of the first markets that returns is the interim, the temporary market, the contractor market. If you're already in that market, then you're in a great place to be providing a lot of additional staff. And obviously, talking to your candidates, assessing who's available immediately is a very important thing to be doing right now. We expect to see that climb back from employers expecting to bringing people in for short-term opportunities, and where that's particularly evident will be with clients who have laid staff off, because they will be extremely reluctant and legally will not be able to be bringing people back into roles they've made redundant. So interim, short-term staff is very important. If you're in it, great. If you're not in it, I advise you to get in it pretty fast, and that will mean looking at how you can support your finances, and you'll be needing to look at finance companies to assist you in providing the cash flow, as it were, to pay your temporary and interim labour force. One thing's very important to mention here: your clients will be just as motivated to get back and start producing additional revenues to replace the revenue they've lost as you are, as we are. And I think one of the things you've really got to be assessing as we start talking to clients is which of your clients are highly motivated to get back to work and will be hitting the ground running, because you clearly need to prioritize your client base. Who do you wish to be aligned to, who will be pushing on very quickly? Conversely, who are likely to be slow and are potentially in trouble? So I think one of the big areas for you as business owners, as recruitment consultants, is to be speaking to your clients now to try to understand what's going to be happening when they return to work and their sentiment in relation to pushing on as fast as possible. This is where, of course, your trusted advisor positioning becomes extremely important. How well do you know your clients? How close are you to them? And I think using this kind of method, video conferencing, which we're all used to, even our grandparents and aunts and uncles are used to using them. This is your method now of contacting clients and to assess exactly what's going to be happening. So pump up your client meetings now. Don't hesitate. We've been very softly up to this point. We're making pastoral calls to clients. Now I think we can get into very strong and very purposeful business talk to make sure that we really start to understand what our clients are looking for. And that, of course, then links back to what kind of candidates we're reaching out to start to establish where the gaps are going to be and what particular candidates we're going to be needing to be providing to our clients. And again, that relates very much to the sectors we're involved in. You do need to understand the market trends in your sectors. Be careful not to, and we talked about this last week, not to stray too far away from your core sectors. Much better to upsell, cross-sell, than in many respects starting to reach out and spread yourself thinly into a range of other sectors, many of which will be difficult to break into and many of which you'll have a limited knowledge of. So if you are thinking of diversifying, that's fine, but you need to be absolutely sure you have the support and the infrastructure within your business to be able to support your aims. Because if you're doing something else, i.e. looking for new business opportunities, exploring new sectors, you need to be taking care of what you've already got. So that's a lot to do with the opportunities that you have within your own sectors right now. Dealing with candidates is very important at this stage. We need to be speaking to them. You should, I'm sure, have been tidying up your databases, your CRMs, you're reskilling your candidates. That's a lot of good work I hope has already been happening in your businesses. And if not, you really need to be looking at that very carefully right now, just to make absolutely sure that you know which particular candidates are going to be looking for work. And we know, of course, that candidates provide fantastic intel into what's going on in their employers, how well they're faring, what's going to be happening when they return to work, and indeed their sentiments as to whether they wish to continue to work for those businesses, or indeed they're looking, as we would expect, potentially for new opportunities once we break out from this current lockdown. They've had a lot of time to be thinking about their futures, and this is fairly typical if you think about the Christmas periods or summer periods when people have the opportunity to reflect and consider what they want to do with the rest of their lives. We'll see similar sentiments from candidates as we emerge from this. They'll be thinking, well, now I want to change my job. I was thinking about it before. Now I definitely want to make a change going forward. So getting close to candidates and clients right now is very, very important. Getting prepared and ready for the opportunity to start trading again, very, very important. And just to pick up Dave's point, you need to be speaking to your staff, in particular your furloughed staff, bring them back into your thinking, collect their thoughts, their concerns, get them trained, get ready, because we're going to be going hopefully very, very, very soon.
Thanks, Paul. And sorry if it was a bit unnerving that I jumped up next to you on the video. Right, let's move forward if we may then, and ask Brad to feed in, please, to this point.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Rich. I hope everyone's doing well. So as we look at our business strategy as lockdown is slightly eased and hopefully will continually be eased, I agree with everything Dave and Paul just mentioned. If I'm running a recruitment business at the moment, that would be on the list of things of my consideration. I want to add 4 more things to that list. 1 is cash, 2 is well-being, 3 is marketing, and 4 is what if. So let me just start by talking about cash. I'm going to go quick so Rich doesn't time get me like he just did with Paul. So with cash, you've got obviously the issue with regards to furloughed staff. Many of you would have taken advantage of the scheme the government put in place. But if you're going to be bringing back staff, there's so many considerations. If we just focus on the cash element of it, if your clients and your candidates are starting to get some momentum going so you can start working again, the reality is you're going to incur costs immediately as you bring people back into the workplace, but that might not necessarily reflect in immediate income. So you need to be really careful with regards to planning your cash position, because your costs are going to increase as you start bringing your staff back in. Equally, you bring your staff back in, some of the services that you've been maybe put on hold, payment holidays, maybe from job boards or other suppliers, you need to give your team the tools to use for when they come back into work. And again, that's another cost that you should take into consideration. So I think cash is a big one, making sure you're planning for that, making sure that you are utilising possibly any of the help the government have put out there, the bounce back loans, any of the other loan schemes that are out there. And I think that should be one of the top priorities for you to consider at the moment. And there's so much more to talk about it, but I just wanted to put that subject out there. The next one is well-being of your team, emotional, physical well-being of your staff. Now, you're going to bring people back into the workplace. We're talking about a return to work. For some, it is a return to work, especially those that have been furloughed. But for many, it's actually just possibly a return to the office because you've been working from home. What are you going to do with staff that have been furloughed or have been working from home when the offices reopen? And maybe some of them are nervous about the commute, as Neil touched on earlier on in his talk. You need to be able to put things in place whereby you can accommodate people's feelings so that you can make sure you're getting the best level of productivity out of them. And I think it's really important in the new world that we're able to adopt an element of flexibility that creates an opportunity for everyone to be able to work to the best of their capabilities. And we now need to be considering a work from home policy. I'd go so far to say, is it a work from home policy actually, or is it just work? And does it matter if it's in the office or if it's in home? But we do need to consider that the well-being of our staff is absolutely paramount. And when they come into the office, have we got the right social distancing measures in place? What's it going to be like for them in the commute? I think the government have come out and turned around and said everyone should start travelling outside of rush hour. Well, if everyone starts travelling outside of rush hour, there will be a new rush hour. So we need to start taking these things into consideration. It's really important that you put the well-being of your team first and foremost with everything that you do, and that way you communicate that will define you as a leader. That leads back into the purpose that I've spoken about before and Dave mentioned earlier on. So moving on from well-being, the next thing I want to talk about is marketing. Again, that impacts cash. But if we work on the premise that as we come back into the workplace, and hopefully there'll be a bit of a spike and we can start trying to gain some opportunities, the way you position yourselves now is really, really important. So actually investing in your business to make sure that you are very present, that you are active on your social media channels, that you are very much in the limelight with your clients and with your candidates, and they can see the activity and they can see your messaging, and that you're giving some great tips and being a thought leader within your space so you can be recognized as one of the go-to people is really important. So I think that marketing spend is something that you guys should be taking into consideration as we look to come out of this crisis, because I think those that are more present out there will have a greater chance of success. And conscious of time, the fourth thing that I want to talk about is what if. And that what if is around what happens if we get a second spike? Because part of my strategy now, if I'm running a business, is if come November, December time, when the flu season comes back, there's possibly another hit of coronavirus, which is certainly a possibility. We all hope not, but we certainly is a possibility. What are you then going to do? Because I think there was a general feeling that maybe we might have been a little bit slow to go into lockdown, and I understand the reasons why. It must have been an incredibly difficult decision for government to make to be able to restrict us all. I don't think that will happen again if this comes back with any kind of vengeance. I think there will be an immediate lockdown. And if there is an immediate lockdown again, there's no excuse not to be prepared for it this time, because we know what it's been like. And I think we should take that in consideration. You should be looking at how the working from home has been, how people have adapted, what you could possibly have done better if you had more time. And I'd be thinking about having some kind of plan in place for that possibility, so that you can continue as best you can should that scenario apply. So there's just 4 things I wanted to cover off. Obviously, there's so many more things as well, but I think they're super important. And Rich, I've just noticed you come on, but I think I finished in time, so I'm going to say I've done better than Paul.
Just stay on for a moment though, Brad, please, because I've got a specific question for you from the audience, which came up while you were speaking, and it's about productivity and and the question is, do you feel that working from home as a policy leaves business owners not being able to control productivity?
Okay, so I mentioned last week about the 3 Ps that I've spoken about: purpose, performance, and profit. And then I added 2 further things in there, which was trust and loyalty. If you've got your purpose right, it generates trust. That trust is from employees to their employers and the other way round. That trust is also with candidates and clients and the way you interact with them. If the trust is there, that creates loyalty. Loyalty creates performance, and that performance creates profit. So actually, if you're worried about someone's performance, you've got to ask yourself, why? Is it because you don't trust them? And if it is because you don't trust them, are they the right people to have in your company? Do they not trust you? I think if everyone is driven by a purpose and they're all going in the same direction, we need to be changing our mentality towards KPIs and looking at the outcomes. We work with people to train them, to motivate them, to educate them, and then hopefully that will materialize in some results. So for me, that's reflective of modern business and modern culture. We don't need to be sitting over our staff and making sure they're doing the right calls or sending the right amount of CVs out. If we do, I'm going to suggest you might not be managing them in the best way, or alternatively, you might not have the right level of recruiter working with you.
Thanks, Brad, and that's great practical advice. Right, I'm going to let you go now, Brad. Thank you. We'll call you back shortly. Let's turn to Howard now, please. Howard, if you can elaborate on the question in hand, that'd be great.
Well, yes, and I'll also bring into answer that question that's just been up as well, because that's part of very much of what I want to talk about. So again, I hope everyone's well and fit, and looking forward to another week as we move on. I think what everyone's said so far is absolutely right, and it all ties into me in mindset. And I want to sort of give a view of my mindset of where I've been. And I remember in 2008, as a director of Computer People, we just bought Spring. I'd inherited a number of offices, including the Edinburgh office. And on the Monday when I went to see them, they had 436 contractors out. On the Friday, that number had dropped to approximately 30, thanks to RBS and the crash. And at that time, I'd often sort of weigh awake at night, and I still do today actually, and I'd be thinking more about my staff, and I'd be worried about my people. I wasn't worried about the big drop in contract numbers because I couldn't affect that. But I was often worried about my people, and I still do now, and I still did then. I used to write notes to myself, send texts to myself about things that I wanted to do. So what I've actually done is I've actually gone back and had a look at some of those texts that I sent and the brain dumps that I was doing in the middle of the night, and what I've done to sort of look at how you build a recession-proof business. And to me, it was all about mindset. As a manager, it was all about the mindset that I portrayed and the mindset that I instilled into my people. And I looked at people first, and I looked at my consultants, and I looked at, if I look after my people, they in turn will look after my clients. If I look after my clients and my candidates from my people, then that will look after my profit. So profit was always last. It wasn't the first thing that I did. So I'd always ask myself, what type of people would I want working for me? And I'd look at them and say, do these people love working for me, or do they simply like working for me? And there's the big difference. There's those people, as Brad was saying there, and Dave was saying about, you want to get the people right that's working for you. And there's a big difference of the people who love working for you, because they will do anything for you. Therefore, you don't have to worry about their KPIs, because they'll try and do things. And those that just like working for you, that will bemoan certain things and begrudge certain things, and therefore you always have that sort of trust issue with them. So they need to feel part of your journey, and you need to make them feel part of your journey to the point where they're helping your business in troubled times. They're bringing things to the table. So how you act as a leader is really important. What you care about is really important. How you portray that to your consultants is important, because whatever you portray to your consultants will run down the line and then be portrayed to your clients, and then that will affect the end line, which is your profit. So you need to invest in your people now. And if you invest in your people and train and develop your people, guess what? They'll invest in your clients and your candidates. And if you invest in your clients and your candidates, they will invest in you, in the whole circle of life and come back together. So really the question is, as goes the head, as does the business. And so I always think if you were thinking profit first, then you're really in for a real big problem, because if you're thinking profit first, then your people aren't going to be interested in you, your client aren't going to be interested in you, and therefore your profit's not going to happen. So you've got to start to think and address them. And these are the things that I actually wrote down. I wrote down the value and the missions of your business and what's going down. And I wrote these things, and these are genuine things of text that I sent to myself. And I wrote recession. It's all about opportunity. Recession is about people, not profit. Profit will be the byproduct of the people. Look after the people and they'll look after your clients. Train, retrain. What new purpose of value can I upskill my teams on? And then I wrote this simple very thing: recession equals redundancy, retraction, recovery, which is a negative mindset. And then I wrote down recession is a negative and positive. Redundancy. Why not invest in people rather than make them redundant? But I need to invest in the right people, and those people need to have a growth mindset and need to love working for me. So they will stand in the hole with me and fight when we have to fight and we need to fight, rather than those that begrudge and bemoan. Then I looked at retract. Market shrinks, business shrinks, reduced competition, but our mindset shrinks if we talk about redundancy. Then I talk about recovery, meaning what's going to go on, what's happening, what happens if the first three really take hold in my business, will we actually recover? And then I wrote these words: recession to me equals retain what I have, reinvest in what I've got, reposition the business, go out and work with my resource, and my resource is my people, and my people being my consultants, my clients, and my candidate, in order to retake market share. And to me, that was all about the mindset of me as the leader, driving my people forward and taking all of the things that Paul, Dave, and Brad have talked about into a management scenario and working with them. The big thing that I took was that as a leader, I can't hold everything in my hands. I have to delegate out. I have to bring my teams into the position to help me do that. So that was all about training and development my junior managers, training and developing the staff underneath to cope with what was actually happening in the marketplace. And so you can look at core basics, and I've been doing lots of training sessions recently on the core basics of recruitment. And I got an email this morning from a lady who said, I've spent 20 years in recruitment. I was on your training session yesterday, and what a refreshing way of looking at the marketplace, what a refreshing way of looking at recruitment by instilling the core basics, putting a modern twist on those core basics to make sure we go back to it. I've been in recruitment for 20 years, and you taught me so much today that I'm embarrassed that I've been in the market for 20 years. And it's things like that, that if our leaders take hold of their businesses and they create positivity, recession shouldn't be a poor word. Recession shouldn't be a word to be feared. Recession should be a word that should be embraced. And when we talk about recession, we should talk about it in a positive light and build those positive pillars around our business where everyone sees the opportunity that recession actually brings. Yes, what Paul is right is saying there's going to be a very sharp downward turn, which we're already in, and there's going to be a really quick recovery in the marketplace. And if you start to go back on the stats and look at the stats are saying that in 1992, when I started in recruitment, 10.5% of the workforce was actually unemployed. They're projecting by the end of Q2 this year, it'll be more than 10.5%. But what they're actually saying at the moment, when we went into lockdown, it was 3.2% of the workforce were unemployed. They're saying by the end of Q4 2021, it will have reduced back to 5.5. So it says there's going to be a sharp intake, which we're already expecting, but there's going to be a really sharp recovery. So mindset is all about, can you get your business in the position to recover? Are your people really positive about what's happening, and will they add that positivity down the line into your clients, into your candidates, which will then circle back to you hopefully in profit? So to me, Richard, it's all about mindset. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. And thank you all of our speakers so far. That's been fascinating. What I'd like to do, you've heard now everything, or you've heard from all the speakers, all 5 of them. So I'd like to turn to poll question 1, please, which is a question for us, which asks you what your concerns about being business ready for the government's 3-step plan. Now, we've put some multiple choice. Please answer, or please choose all that apply. If there's anything you would like to add, just ping them through as a question and we'll capture that data as well. While you complete that, we have had a number of questions around furlough, and some of them specific and some of them generalist. There's 1 or 2 that are about government position. So I will turn to Neil first on these questions, if I may. But just to remind everybody, you won't be able to see Neil because while the poll question is up, the videos will not overwrite. So Neil, the first question I'd really like to ask is one around what furlough may become in the future. So there is a specific question here around, will furlough do you think furlough will have a part-time option? So that people can bring, particularly small consultancies, can bring some consultants back on a part-time basis to try and get their businesses up and running in future months.
So let's, I've been digging through some of the questions while I was listening to the panel, and I think let's think about the job retention scheme as a whole and what it's really now for, because when it was born, it was basically a scheme to stop mass redundancies happening in a real rush. It's now become a scheme to manage as many people who are on furlough as possible back to work and to manage the impact of redundancies as they happen. And I think everyone in government understands that what we're now managing is some kind of some kind of rise in unemployment to a higher level than we've known since, as I was just saying, since '92. In doing that, part-time is critical because you extend and then you allow people to be paid by their employer for the work they do and receive the top-up. That is what the Chancellor announced on Tuesday will happen. It is what we argued for. It's what sister bodies from other sectors argued for. It's what the CBI, the TUC argued for. So we are in good shape to deliver that. I'm going to have to say patience is a virtue on this stuff. Government is working on it. Some of you know that we got the holiday pay guidance out yesterday, which took weeks to get where it needed to be, and that is just a function of government doing a million things at once and bandwidth. So end of the month for some thinking about part-time, but definitely going to happen, and very well established in other countries around Europe. This kind of what the Germans would call Kurzarbeit system is very standard in normal recessions. We've never done it before in the UK because actually it never made sense for the government. It always involved more government spending rather than saving money on the welfare bill, as it does in Germany. It absolutely makes sense now, so it's definitely going to happen.
Great, thanks, Neil. There is, we have got 54% of people have voted, so I think we'll leave it for a minute or two on this poll. So if anybody can add their votes as soon as possible, that's great. We can close that in a moment and then move on to it. Yes,
can I answer the question about kitchens? It's just because someone asked a question about closing kitchen, and I find myself leveraging one of my hats between 2007 and 11 was head of health and safety at the CBI, so I find myself leveraging this all the time. And I'm just going to tell you what we're doing in the reopening plan for the REC because I think it makes sense. I think you don't have to shut a kitchen space. You need to make sure that people can socially distance in it. I would be inclined to ask your staff to bring their own utensils to work and take them home with them at the end of the day and not leave them in workplace sinks, so that you're minimizing the risk of shared materials. make sure you probably need to have antiseptic wipes, wipes available to wipe down the kettle handles and fridge handles and so forth. And if you have meeting room space and you want to have a place for people to have a break away from their desk, a socially distanced use of a largish meeting room for a couple of people is probably better than having people hanging around in the kitchen space, because what you want to do is minimize the number of people who are in the kitchen space at one time. And that's what our plan at the REC says, and actually I know it's what a number of other plans say, but as someone asked, I thought I'd answer the question.
Thank you. Is there any other questions you would like to take up and answer? If not, what I'll do is we'll close the poll now, please, so we can see the results. So it's interesting there. Look, if you look at the results, one of the biggest concerns is still around the clients, and that really does follow from everything that our panelists have said over the weeks. Managing health and safety is up there as well. There is lots of advice both from the REC and the HSC on this. And we will share links. One of the listeners has very kindly shared a link with us of some information they have found useful. So we will share that one with you as well. So thank you to that particular listener. Neil, is there any of the other questions that you've seen that you would like to take to answer, or shall we move on?
Time is marching on. Why don't we proceed?
Okay, thank you. So if there is any specific questions we haven't been able to answer today, then we will endeavour to get those answered for you either in the follow-up or not. But before I close, what I would like to do is I'd just like to ask the panelists to give one final point, Paul, Brad, Howard and Dave, but specifically while they do that, we have, as you know, got a running poll which we ask every week, which is about your confidence in the economy. So I'd like to open poll 2 while we go to the speakers. So Paul, have you anything that you would like to round up on and as a takeaway for the listeners?
Yeah, hi Richard. Well, I think really it's been a very comprehensive webinar, and one of the things that I'd sort of finish on is this whole point about planning. We've spent the entire webinar talking about this. There's a lot of things that presently are still a bit foggy, but there's an awful lot that we as business owners can actually control ourselves. Last week I read out a Bain & Co phrase, a paraphrase from that again. They talked briefly about the best drivers on a racetrack and how they just deal with getting into the curve, and what they do is they brake before the curve. In our parlance, that would be looking at costs. We've done that. Most businesses have been paring down costs with a lot of government aid, of course. We're now in that curve, the position where we're actually going around the curve. Good drivers on a racetrack will be putting their foot on the actual accelerator at this point because they want to speed out of the curve. And I think that's where we're at right now. So getting prepared for business, proper business, which is what I was talking about, what we've been talking about right now, is extremely important. And then I think lastly, as we start to accelerate out of the curve, you want to be looking at how you innovate in your business, how you look to redefine what you do, how you improve your service levels with your clients and candidates. And now at this stage, as we're preparing, this is the point at which you need to be talking to your own people, innovating, creating, thinking about how you keep the service levels that you want to provide to your clients and candidates at in the center of your thinking. How do we provide better service as we come out of this situation?
Thanks, Paul. Bradley, is there any final points from yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Just to pick up on a couple of things Paul just mentioned, he brought the word controlling, and then he talked about going out there and almost starting again based on the new world, that we've got to improve everything, and that's absolutely right. But we mentioned a few weeks ago, and I think it's really important for those that have had some really successful businesses pre-COVID, that you may well have been doing things really well. And whilst everyone's talking about we've got to do this new, that new, and the other new, let's also recognise what we have done well before in the past. And actually, it's about re-implementing some of those things that might have just not been there over the last couple of months, simply because the market hasn't allowed it to. So not everyone needs to reinvent the wheel, and I don't want anyone to walk away from here thinking they've beaten themselves up, that they've got to come up with something new in terms of the levels of service, because many of you are doing a great job in the first place. That's one thing. Paul also mentioned the word control, and I think that's so important, because especially at such a precarious time, you want to focus on the things you can control, because there's many things that you can't. And I think the one thing that you can control is how you interact with your people. I touched on it when I answered that question earlier on around the purpose and about the trust. Howard talked about mindset, and I think that's absolutely spot on. You know, as a leader at the moment, you want to make sure that you're there making a difference to those that work with you. You want to be able to enhance their skill set. You want to be able to give them the best work experience. You want to be able to give them an opportunity whereby hopefully they can make some decent money. But in return, what you need is a certain level of hard work, commitment, endeavour. And it's all about your people at the end of the day. And as a leader, if you've got your mindset right, as Howard said, then hopefully you can pass that on to those that are working with you, and you can all go on a journey. And if the purpose is clear, that could be a really exciting opportunity, because whilst it is difficult at the moment, there will without doubt be opportunity as the months progress, certainly going into next year as well. So there is a degree of optimism that we should have, even though it is difficult at the moment.
Thank you very much, Bradley. And what we'll do is I'm going to, in a moment, we'll go to Howard, and Dave, and then afterwards I'll show you the confidence measure, and I think it's backing up exactly what you've just said. So let's go to Howard. Final points, Howard, please.
I think it's very interesting what everyone's been saying today, and I think the big sort of takeaway to me is that there's a big difference between managers and leaders, and it's time for leaders to stand up. And I think as a leader, I always used to say that, you know, no person is an island, and it's no time to sort of isolate yourself as a leader. You need to search for answers. You need to clarify those answers. You need to be able to adapt. You need to make a plan, but understand that your plan is fluid. As Brad said there, you need to compare and contrast what was working well in the past will work again well in the future, but how can you improve that, and look at the contrast of now what's not working and what can you move to. And I think the big thing that probably we've not mentioned at all really in this webinar is data. Data will give you a massive amount of information, and if you use your data correctly, both on what your consultants are doing, what your clients are doing, what your candidates are doing, and you keep collating data, then you'll start to see the methodology behind your business and where your strengths and weaknesses are, and then you can start to really adapt to where you need to be.
Thanks, Howard. And Dave.
Yeah, I think it's been a very informative webinar. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Sir Clive Woodward, who, for those of us who are rugby fans, know that he led the England team to World Cup. And he speaks a lot about learning from every setback. And he says, I never lose, I win, or I learn. And that's the situation that we find ourselves as leaders in right now. We've led our people into this lockdown. We're going to lead them out. To Neil's point earlier, please keep collaborating with the REC. Please keep the REC in touch with things that are happening on the ground so that we know what's going on, so that Neil and his team can liaise with government about changes that you may be seeing, and continue to focus on the critical behaviours that made your business successful before. Continue to lead by example. Ask yourself, how would you like to be led, and do that with your teams, and continue to amplify the success stories that you will be having both with your furloughed staff, your clients, and your contractors.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all our panelists. Can we close the poll now, please, so we can share the results? So the results are very clearly that there is a confidence that the economy will bounce back and your businesses will bounce back. What has shifted over the 8 weeks we have done these webinars is the very confident has moved a little bit into the little confidence, but it will take time. So I think there's a realization that it is going to happen, but it will just take a bit of time to get through the unknown. So thank you. Can you close that for us now, please? I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you all for listening and for being part of this webinar series. You'll see there's some links on the slides. These slides will be sent out in the follow-up email, as will the contact details for the speakers. Please do follow up. Please remember, for those of you that haven't joined us before, the 4 speakers from WorkLife and To Augment they are offering you a free 1-hour consultation, or up to an hour consultation, free of charge, no obligation. So I would recommend that you take that opportunity up. And for those of you that are REC members, please go to our website, have a look at the information we have available to members. And even if you're not a member, there is a lot of information available on the COVID-19 hub, which you can see the link on the slide that's there. So thank you all again for listening. Hope to see you at same place or same time next week. We will be sending out email with the next webinar details. So again, thank you very much, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.